everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of Festival Focus. We are talking about betting at the Cheltenham Festival. Last week it was all about the Gold Cup. This week it's all about the Unibet Champion Hurdle. I'm Ben Linfoot, joined by Dave Massey, Matt Brocklebank and Martin Dixon. And, well, there's only one place to start, Martin, isn't there? Constitution Hill, odds-on favourite, and everyone will be looking forward to seeing him on day one at Cheltenham.
Yeah, he's a massive draw for the whole week at Cheltenham. He's obviously a fan's favourite, still unbeaten. Gutted that we didn't get to see him at last year's festival, and hopefully he can put that record straight this year. He was absolutely fantastic when he won the Supreme. I suppose the question on everyone's mind is he still that same horse that he was a couple of seasons ago? And there'll be some connections of other fancied horses that will be clinging to the hope that he might not still have that level of ability. We haven't quite seen those performances yet from him this year, but I've been impressed with how he's done it in both of his wins. I've liked the fact that we've seen him do it twice. I thought it was good that Henderson sent him to the trials meeting and that we knew he'd come out of his first race okay. And to be honest, he did what he had to do at the trials meeting. He beat horses on the bridle that he was fully entitled to beat. But only 10 entries for the Champion Hurdle at this stage. Gone are the days of big field Champion Hurdles, I think, certainly for the time being. It's a bit disappointing, but it still could be a fantastic race if, and that is a significant if, those big four horses, Lossiemouth, Constitution Hill, Stateman and Brighter Days Ahead, if they all turn up, it'll still be a cracker.
It will be indeed. And Dave, you've seen Constitution Hill in the flesh this season?
Yeah, I've seen him both times. And at Cheltenham. Funnily enough, he's never a horse that you know, as a paddock watcher, he never knocks your eye out. He's a nice looking horse, but you know, if you put him in an ordinary 0 to 120 field, he wouldn't stand out in that respect. But yeah, I've seen him twice this season. I thought first time at Kempton, actually, Lossiemouth looked. I thought Lossiemouth looked the fitter of the two. Constitution Hill would definitely come on a bit for the run, unsurprisingly. So, one of the things that we do as trackside, we tend to sort of not just watch, you know, beforehand, but after as well. And we watched both Constitution Hill and Lossiemouth come back out the winner's enclosure and back to the stables, and it was the demeanours were quite contrasting. Constitution Hill was really perky on his toes. He looked like he could go out there and do it again. Lossiemouth, as she came back in, looked very tired. Head was down. She looked like she'd had a hard race. And I thought to myself at that point, I can't see a way if all three line up that Lossiemouth can reverse the form with Constitution Hill on that. And indeed, her body of form is very solid. But to me, there isn't a single run that Lossiemouth has done that says that she can beat even the sort of 2024, 2025 model of Constitution Hill.
It's quite a difficult race to approach Antipost, isn't it, at the minute, with question marks over the participation of quite a few of the potential rivals to Constitution Hill in this race?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't put anyone off having an Antipost bet, as Martin suggested. Kind of, you know, you have got that amount of runners now where you're looking at, you know, if you do lose Lossiemouth or Brighter Days Ahead or both, then you could be sat on a nice ticket with Burdett Road or potentially Golden Ace. They clash this weekend at Wincanton. Interesting race that. It's obviously going to be a rung below what we've seen in the kind of grade ones and from these star horses elsewhere, but it is an interesting clash. Not too hard to see them, kind of the winner of that race, shortening up a little bit. Brighter Days Ahead, as Dave sort of said, she is the one that's shown a performance that suggests she could challenge Constitution Hill. Then again, I just keep coming back to the fact that was it a bit of a flash in the pan that we saw from her over Christmas? It was devastatingly good, but in the same breath, you have to mention that Stateman clearly wasn't himself. Obviously, Mystical Power's gone backwards, and the race ended up being a bit of a nothing kind of race. I would possibly judge her more closely on the narrow defeat of Stateman. That was when he was making his comeback in the Morgiana Hurdle. She had the benefit of fitness, having run at Down Royal in the season. And obviously we've got to factor in the fact that Gordon Elliott all along has kind of said, really, she wants a trip. You know, this is a mare that's won over 2 miles 5 on heavy ground last season. And she's, I think he referred to her as kind of a proper grinder. She gets into that one gear and she gallops now. obviously what we saw from her at Leopardstown last time suggests that she does have that little bit of magic dust as well. But I'd focus on the previous body of work maybe rather than that isolated incident, which looked exceptional. But whether she'd be able to repeat that back at Cheltenham, where she was beaten last year, let's not forget, by Golden Ace, is questionable, I think.
Yeah, Martin, what's your gut feeling with Brighter Days Ahead and her potential participation, and 10 runners in the champion hurdle at this stage? Is there an anti-post punting angle to have a go at?
Yeah, I mean, touch on Brighter Days Ahead first. My gut feeling is that she'll end up going for the Mares Hurdle. I've always felt like that was the likeliest destination for her, to be honest. They're obviously going to be keeping their options open publicly at this moment in time, but I think if Constitution Hill gets there in one piece, State Man the same, and they'll be looking at what Lossiemouth does to some extent. But I think those two, if those two end up there, particularly Constitution Hill, I think Gordon Elliott and his team will be looking for what they might regard as the easier option. And I think that will be the Mares Hurdle. Matt touches on the trip. Obviously, she's very effective around 2 miles. We've seen that from her strong galloping displays this season, but going up in distance wouldn't be an issue for her either. And I just think they'll be focusing on trying to get festival winners, which is always the case with that team and many others as well. And I think her easiest option will be to go and win the Mares Hurdle. And I think that's probably where she'll end up. So it's unlikely, therefore, that we're going to get all four of those big players rocking up in a champion hurdle. I think it's also unlikely that we get all 6 of the outsiders in a champion hurdle. So you're looking at it at this stage with 10 entries anti-post. I think we're very likely to get a situation where we're dealing with a 6 or 7 runner champion hurdle this year. That means on the day you'll be playing for 2 places each way rather than the 3 that they're offering anti-post at the moment. And Dave did mention last week about the maths of anti-post betting, and that's often where the biggest appeal is, really, to get involved at this moment in time. And Matt's already talked about Golden Ace, but she's as big as 50s without the non-runner no bet concession in a place, but as big as 40s with it. I think Sky Bet and Betfair are 33s at the moment. Sky Bet have got the non-runner no bet concession as well. And I do think those big prices about her offer value at this moment in time. She's declared for the Kingwell, as Matt said, on Saturday. I fancy her to turn over Burdett Road there. Jeremy Scott's horses have had a quiet year. That's been well documented, but they're coming out the other side of that now. She's still run with credit on her 2 starts this year, giving me the impression that she's going to be a better mare back at 2 miles in a well-run race, which she's going to get the opportunity to show at the weekend. You know, if she goes and wins the Kingwell, which I think she's got every chance of doing, she's naturally just going to shorten up a little bit anti-post from those very big prices that are available at the moment. If she doesn't win it, she might well go elsewhere herself. And if you're on the non-runner no bet concession, you'd be getting your money back anyway. But I think big prices about her at the moment, with the 3 places anti-post, could end up looking like a good bet. For all that, I'm not saying she'll go and win the champion hurdle. She has got a good Cheltenham record. She did beat Brighter Days Ahead at the meeting last year, and I think she might just be about ready to hit peak condition now at this stage of the season.
Yeah, I like it. Golden Ace, big price. Dave, you were on about it's all about the math last week. Do you agree with Martin's assessment there?
I do. Although I've gone down a different road. I've gone down a Burdett road. Then I did there. After Christmas and after seeing him in the flesh there, I thought that was quite a decent effort from Burdett Road. He is still going the right way. He is still taking steps forward. And I know, on that run at Kempton, he can't beat Constitution Hill. He's got 9 lengths to find, but he did get the last badly wrong that day. I mean, he clattered the last, and Harry Cobden immediately sort of eased him off. I think, had he winged the last and gone flat out, he might have got beat 4 or 5. But Harry was very easy on him. But I thought at that point again, the maths kicks in again, doesn't it? And I was fairly convinced at that point that Lossiemouth might go mares, and of course you've still got at the back of your mind, something that we've touched on before about horses. They've got to get to Cheltenham and Constitution Hill. For all that he's not been injured, he's had his issues, and they've got to get him there. They've got to get him in one piece there. So at that point, I thought I'd like to back a horse that's still taking steps forward, that's proven at Cheltenham, and that pretty much goes on any ground, I think. And I had a little bit each way on Burdett Road, all in at that point. I'm all in. If he gets taken out, if Golden Ace wins at the weekend, then probably the end of that. So it makes sense for me to do what Martin's sort of saying, and Golden Ace, have that as a backup now, non-running a bet. But I just think, I was merely looking for something, again, playing the maths. How many runners are we going to get? We're unlikely to get 8 runners, and I've just bet something that is at least going the right way, and Burdett Road is going the right way.
Matt, I tell you, I haven't talked about yet. Last year's winner, State Man. How do you assess his chance at the minute? It's a difficult one after what happened last time.
It is a little bit, yeah, but he's been ultra solid now, hasn't he? Since that, since he won the county hurdle, he won like a dozen races, across sort of. I think he won 13 out of 14 during that period, and the one defeat was a 9-length defeat to Constitution Hill in the Champion Hurdle, and he's kind of been a constant throughout. And yet this season he's had those sort of bumps in the road, obviously getting beaten in the Morgiana. But the more you watch the Morgiana hurdle back, he did look like he came there as the better horse than Brighter Days Ahead over that trip. And she just totally outstayed him in the end. His lack of a recent run clearly paid. Then he wasn't his best at all. It's a complete scratch run, isn't it, when he ran, beaten 30 lengths by over Christmas. And then last time, I mean, no wonder William Mullins was shaking his head a little bit after the race. I mean, thank God, Lossy Mouth and Danny Mullins got up, because that was a weird race, wasn't it? What were they playing out there? Danny Mullins went absolutely berserk on her out in front. Like, clearly, I mean, he's been called a few names by his own family, I think, Danny Mullins, but I think some punters must have thought, what is Danny doing on Lossy Mouth here? Because he really, they went off like scalded cats, the pair of them. In the end, Stateman was far from impressive. He was entitled to get a little bit, dossy at the end, wasn't it? He'd been in front for so long, and he was miles ahead, and he kind of knew that Paul Towner knew he had the race won. So he's a bit of a question mark, but at the same time, he was beaten 9 lengths by Constitution Hill in that Champion Hurdle, and we're talking about Burdett Road, who was beaten 9 lengths in the Christmas Hurdle just this season. So he's one of that, you sort of know that Willie's going to have him right, and he's going to run his race, but I can't have him beating, at the age of 8, I can't have him beating Constitution Hill. That's the problem. And he's just priced up about right, isn't he?
Yeah, I think so. Okay, that's pretty much the Champion Hurdle done and dusted in terms of this year's renewal. But Martin, I just wanted to ask you about the wider picture of the 2-mile hurdling scene, and if you had any concerns for the Champion Hurdle going forward, because to me, it's one of the crown jewels of the Cheltenham Festival that just feels a little bit underwhelming these days. I think the Gold Cup's brilliant. The Stayers Hurdle and the Ryanair are competitive. The Champion Chase is a thrilling spectacle. But the Champion Hurdle, it just seems it's one or two setbacks away from being a really underwhelming race.
Very much so, yeah. I mean, it's been creeping up on us now for a few years. I think a couple of years ago there were 7 runners. Last year there were 8 runners, I think, in the race. And you look at the average field size over the last 20 years, and there's just been a monumental decrease in the number of horses in this division, and it goes right through the season, doesn't it? You're looking at the Kingwell on Saturday with a handful of runners, and all the grade ones even in Ireland have been small fields, and it's just the nature of the 2-mile hurdle division. There aren't as many horses, and it is a concern, and it's I think quite simply related to the fact that so many horses get sold abroad from the flat, isn't it, these days, and horses that would naturally have transitioned to hurdling in years gone by are no longer doing that, and it leaves us with a much reduced division of horses at the top end of the 2-milers. Most of the point-to-pointers we have coming through want longer distances. Not all of them, of course, but a lot of them do. And yeah, it is a concern without a doubt. I mean, thankfully at the moment we still have sort of 3 or 4 genuine top class 2-milers, don't we, to make it a little bit more interesting, but it won't always be the case.
And it wasn't always the case, was it, Dave? We used to have big field Champion Hurdles at Cheltenham. What sticks out in the Massey memory bank?
You're talking about races that are happening before my time, Ben.
Come on.
Listen, I think of the ones of the ones that I've seen, I think, you know, the hurdlers of my generation, I think the best two for me have been See You Then and Nisterbrack. I think they're the two that I think more than any others that sort of stand out. And again, you know, multiple win. It's funny how many multiple winners of this race there are, and they, you know, as multiple winners, they do sort of stand out a little bit. From a punting perspective, Catch It, weirdly, is the one. Little Catch It. I've got a photo of him on the wall somewhere up here, and he was the one that sort of from a punting perspective. I loved the little horse. I thought he was a great character.
He was a prime example of an ex flat horse, wasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
To be fair, he wasn't even the type of flat horse. Yeah, he wasn't a star, was he? He took ages
didn't
to
have
win
the
it.
size for the game, hardly a looker, but he had the speed for it, and you know. But yeah, I mean, everything Martin. I can only echo what Martin says. You know, everything's creeping up is the right. You use the phrase creeping up. As it's been creeping up on us for years now. You know, we know what the problems are. It's addressing them, and it's, you know, the four of us here are not people to sort of address those issues. There are people with more power than us that can do something about it. But we just seem to be heading in the wrong direction, which is a shame.
Just looking ahead, Scoop, as well. There's no obvious sign in that sort of turning around at all, is there? Just look at the novices from this season, the likes of File Demand and Copet de Board. I was thinking of Romeo Coolio, horses like that. They're all going to go chasing, aren't they? You know, probably next season. You know, maybe the New Lion, could he be one that books the trend and you know, really does turn into a champion hurdle horse? And then at the same time, he's won a Challow hurdle, so you've got to question that as well. And then and you're looking at the kind of the Triumph hurdle horses like Catch It, but they're all sort of stayers these days, aren't they? They tend to end up sort of staying longer trips anyway.
Absolutely, but hopefully we get Constitution Hill, State Man, Brighter Days Ahead, and they all have a go at this year's champion hurdle. If they do, it's going to be a terrific spectacle. Right, section 2 of the podcast, On the Radar, and I wanted to start here, gents, with the Arkle, because obviously we've had the news that Sergino is out for the rest of the season. And I just thought this might be a good little market to have a look at, because we've got Majbra as odds-on favourite, but you know, he's not been the most convincing at his fences, has he? And I wondered if there might be something on the radar for this race. I was going to mention Only by Night myself for Gavin Cromwell. Obviously, he's got plenty of options in the mares chase, and I think she's a 6-1 shot for that race, Only by Night, but could well come into the reckoning for the Arkle now on the back of a really nice win just the other day at Exeter when jumping really well. And look, she's not been missed. I think she's third favourite for the Arkle at around 12-1. But she was certainly creeping onto my radar for that race. I just wondered if anyone else had any thoughts on the Arkle.
Not many runners. It's going to be a theme, isn't it? But I suppose they get rid of the 2.5 mile novice chase, and we were kind of hoping for a stronger Brown advisory and a deeper Arkle as well. I go through this field, Scoop, and I'm really worried for the Arkle. I think we're looking at 4 or 5 in this. You know, like the likes of Gidley Park has all but been ruled out. We might get Firefox, obviously not Ballyburn, Caldwell Potter there going elsewhere, Kelly de Burley elsewhere. You can't see Springwell Bay running in an Arkle. Touch Me Not, he could get a handicap entry, couldn't he now? That would be interesting if he steps up for the plate. So I would be amazed if Only by Night doesn't run in this race now. Immediately after the win on Sunday, that was at Exeter, wasn't it, where she was quite impressive. She carried the penalty, the Grade 2 winners penalty, and did it really easily in the end. Keith Donoghue didn't have to get serious at all, but I'd be amazed if she didn't run in this, not only because Gavin Cromwell's got 2 or 3 at least for the mares as well. So a soft ground Arkle, she could be an interesting player. And the other one, it does sound a lot like now Nicky Henderson has all but confirmed Django Bay will be parachuted in here in replace of Sergino, and he's got to be of interest. And now, obviously, Nicky's been saying all season 2.5 miles, and if it was, you know, if only there was still a 2.5 mile Grade 1. But I think he'd be competitive in an Arkle. I really do. He's made a bright start to his life over fences. He really has. He beat Springwell Bay impressively at Cheltenham, and then went down He was outstayed, wasn't he? The Silly Owls by handstands at a good stay, but he jumped well that day, and I don't know, slightly controversial, but I actually thought Ben Jones maybe outrode Nico de Boinville a little bit there after the last. Nico possibly might have wanted that race back again if he could. But Django Bay's a player. He's a top class horse. I think I'd class him as a Grade 1 UK horse, Django Bay. Now it's just whether the Madgeborough is on another level. It could well be, but Django Bay is going to be a horse that we hear a lot about over the next couple of seasons.
Yeah, I don't think he's tried. Well, he's not run over 2 miles since he won the Formby, has he? At Aintree as a novice hurdler, but.
That's it. Yeah. He's been campaigned over further, and they were sort of, they've got him in the Brown advisory, and I think it's obviously what with Sergino coming out, they've decided they have to really. Nicky wants to be represented, and you can understand why. But looking back through the Silly Isles, it does tend to obviously throw up staying horses. We've had, Jerry Calam and Lon Presse win it. I did remember Captain Chris getting beat in that race as well narrowly. He lost there and came and won the Arkle, so it wouldn't be completely unheard of.
Martin, any Arkle thoughts? And if not, what's on your radar?
Well, I think the main thing to focus on with the Arkle is the same as what we've discussed with the Champion Hurdle, really, is that if you fancy taking a stab at something at a big price, each way anti-post 3 places, it could well end up being a 2 places on the day race. And you don't have to find. I mean, Django Bay would be an obvious one. I think he would have certainly have a good chance of hitting the frame. I wouldn't be amazed if Springwell Bay did end up in this race. I think it will be under some consideration anyway. He's a very strong travelling horse. He wants a pace to aim at. When he was beaten by Django Bay there earlier on in the season over 2.5, he was conceding £8 to him for starters. And I think the way that the race was run, which wasn't a very strongly run race, just didn't really suit him and probably didn't get to the bottom of him. And he still ran pretty well, giving £8 to Django Bay. I know he was comfortably seen off, but just naturally in an Arkle, you'd often get a stronger gallop. I could see Madgeborough, maybe setting off and ensuring that himself anyway, potentially. And yeah, that tempo of race would probably suit Springwell Bay well. He is, I think, as big as 25s, non-runner, no bet. You'd want that concession because obviously they do have other options that they'll be considering. But he's one of them that it might not have been factored in the same way that it has with Django Bay and Only by Night in terms of being likely runners in the race. I don't think it's really been factored in at this stage. And obviously, if you're dealing with a non-runner, no bet concession, it doesn't matter if they don't turn up. You get your money back. But I could see him having a possible option of going there. And I don't think he'd be a no-hoper for hitting the frame. I mean, he's actually rated higher than Django Bay, isn't he? Officially, he's a pound higher after his easy win in a handicap there last time.
A few horses potentially in the Arkle picture here, Dave. Is there anything on your Arkle radar?
I think the lads have probably mentioned 2 of the more interesting ones. I suppose I have to say from a paddock perspective, Django Bay's a funny one because he doesn't look like your archetypal chaser at all. In terms of an engine at the back, it isn't really there. All of his sort of power comes from his core rather than the back end. So he's not what I would call your old-fashioned chasing type, but he is of some interest. And Martin is quite right to make the case about Springwell Bay as well, because quite often, horses that we think their best trip is 2.5, actually, you need that extra stamina to win an Arkle that's run a good pace, which even if we do end up, we're saying 2 places, God forbid, we might only end up with 1 place. It might be that sort of a race, and yet still Madgeborough will go out there and make it a test. So Springwell Bay does come into it. We have to touch, I suppose, on Lo de Sud, who is another, in Matt's words, UK Grade 1 horse. The race at the weekend, I mean, Martin and I were both at Warwick at the weekend. It was another, not for the first time, a strange run affair. We've seen that race before with John Bon and Calico having their little match, and John Bon falling in over Calico, but it didn't really stop him running his race at Cheltenham a few weeks later. That can't be any good now. And he bumped into El Fabiolo, yeah, but he still ran his race. So I think Lo de Sud was a weird race at the weekend. Harry tried to win the race 3 out, and whether he thought he was going to sort of break Reba at that point, and Lorcan Williams had sort of accept the situation, give up, and he could coast him home. Thank you very much. But obviously that didn't turn out to be the case. He possibly had he possibly had a slightly harder race than perhaps they were hoping. But I don't think that's necessarily any bad thing. Just sharpen him up a little bit. His jumping's been really good, Loader Suit. I think, the right two are at the head of the market, aren't they? You can't argue with Majbur being the favourite, and Loader Suit being second favourite. I don't think. From a betting perspective, as I say, it doesn't. I should get involved because the maths is there. But at the minute, I'm happy to I'm happy to have my focus elsewhere, Ben.
Okay. Yeah, I thought he jumped really well, Loader Sudden, and that could be a vital asset in an Arkle, but whether he's quite got the class, we will see. Dave, what else is on your radar? You must have loads on a list in there.
Oh, yeah, well, am I going to steal Martin's thunder here? Am I going to steal your thunder, Martin?
Listen, go ahead. We're in agreement on this, but I'll leave the floor to you.
We're again, harping on, but we were both at Warwick at the weekend. Martin was there for TV purposes, and I was there for paddocking purposes, and we both spotted the run in the handicap hurdle of No Ordinary Joe in the JP McManus colours, who finished close third. Was it in the end? I think Martin third, fourth.
Fourth, I think he was.
Fourth, it was in the end. My notes
should have been
for the race. Yeah, it might be, but my notes for the race, they were sort of going around saying, despite the fact it's had a run 2 weeks ago, still doesn't look fit, still doesn't look 100% fit. And Martin made the remark to me afterwards that perhaps this might be the one that's been lined up for the boys' race at Cheltenham for the Martin Pipe, given that Callum Pritchard took the ride at the weekend. I think that one immediately went to the top of mine and Martin's on the radar for this week anyway. I think it was a very interesting one.
Yeah, I'd be pretty strong on this. Just as I said, the fact that we were both on track, I definitely felt beforehand he wasn't razor sharp. It's not often you look at a Henderson horse in the paddock beforehand and you think, I'm not sure that's quite ready. But it was definitely the case with No Ordinary Joe that he looked as if he would strip a fair bit fitter. He's obviously had a very quiet season, but just have a watch of that race back. I mean, it clearly does not get to the bottom of him. He travels really well through it. He's not given a hard time at all. Like I say, he should really have been third, to be honest. After the last, he's not got stuck into him at all. And he's a horse that was second in the Martin Pipe 2 years ago to Iroka, which is pretty strong form in its own right. He actually ran in it again last year. He was one of the very few horses that Nicky allowed to take his chance last year. And on unsuitably testing ground, he finished seventh, not disgraced. But given the way the stable were performing, you'd kind of throw the run out regardless. But he's obviously had two goes at it. One of them was an exceptional run off a similar rating. I think he's a pound lower this time than he was when he was second to Iroka. They've let Callum have a little sit on him and a get to know the horse, which would give me the indication that it's very much the boys' race and Callum Pritchard will be on him at the Cheltenham Festival. And I think he's really interesting for the Martin Pipe. You can get as big as 16s, I think generally sort of 14s and 12s, but I could see him getting really well backed through the week.
Okay, I like this. A bit of a festival-focused team collaboration on track. That is that's exactly what I want to say. And I sense that there might be some points on that in the final section of the podcast. Matt, is there any horses on your radar?
Well, it's interesting because there was the one, there was the JP one Exeter as well, wasn't there, in the Pertemps qualifier? So he's
Jericho de Repenay.
Jericho, that's the one. Jericho de Repenay, who was really disappointing, obviously, last year in the Supreme and didn't quite live up to it, but he looks like he's going to make his name as a stayer. I went to look at the prices straight after that, and he shot to the top of the market on the back of that. I catch him run behind Catch Him Derry. The race I've been looking at is the Albert Bartlett. And not for any particular reason in terms of recent form, but I did want to flag up a horse that I thought might be overpriced. Obviously, this is a race in which we've not got a Willie Mullins hot. So that's probably what's led me to investigate the Albert Bartlett a little bit as well. I'm not massively sold on those towards the top of the market. I know the Big Westerner is clearly held in high regard. I'd be a little bit concerned about them. A lightly raced mare going into a race of this nature. Two horses interest me. Wingmen has got to be interesting. I think Final Demand's going to take the hell of a lot of beating in the Turners and is a real star in the making. So anything that's finished behind him has to be marked up. And I think Wingmen could be ready to improve his form as he goes up to 3 miles. He's had, I suppose, the thing that might put me off, he's had kind of the archetypal Martin Pipe prep without the extra run, so he's not going to be qualified for that. So he is probably going to have to run in the Albert Bartlett rather than a handicap now, which I suppose isn't a bad thing. You know, a lot of Gordon Elliott's handicappers in those Cheltenham Festival races tend to end up in the Grade 1s at Aintree or Punchestown or beyond as well. So I think he's a horse with plenty of upside going up to 3 miles. But the one I thought was, you know, Wingmen's only about 12 to 1, I think now. The one I thought was overpriced was John McConnell's horse. If we don't get horrible ground, which I know we can sometimes on the Friday of Cheltenham, but Intense Approach is the one that interests me. He's had the 9 starts over hurdles now, a second season novice. Things did not work out well for him last season at all. He fell at Wexford. He pulled up at Kelso. That was in the Grade 2 there, and then it ended up falling again in a Bellistown maiden. That was kind of over the summer. So he started him off early, and he's still a little bit ponderous over his hurdles, but he's really gone through the ranks now. I think he's ready for a test like this. McConnell's record at Cheltenham is superb, and I think the real kind of cherry on the top for me in terms of price here, we're looking at quite a big price. We're looking at 25 to 1 with the non-run no bet. You can get plenty of 33s, but it's not a maths situation, Scoop, but it's a jockey situation. I think we might end up with a Cobden or a Bowen on this horse, which would be obviously a big boost. He was ridden by Alex Harvey and Ben Harvey earlier in the season, and Harry Cobden actually hit this horse for the first time in the Persian War. He finished second, then he stepped him up to 3 miles for the first time when he was an impressive winner of that 3 mile novice hurdle at the October meeting. And O'Connell's got a good record in that race. He's won it before with Bardenstown Lad, who went on to be placed in the Albert Bartlett as well. And then he's kept him away from the winter ground and brought him back at Musselburgh just earlier this month. So he was an impressive winner. It wasn't much of a race, and he had a pop round nicely under James Bowen. So, you know, whether you're getting Harry Cobden, James Bowen, or Sean Bowen, who is, what is he now? He's got a good record for the trainer, obviously rode Moondorange at Cheltenham to victory earlier in the season. But James Bowen's now 4 from 8 for McConnell. Cobden, I think, is 2 from 5. So it's a bit of a jockey play. I think he's overpriced. He's a winner. We know he handles Cheltenham, and we know he's got that experience under the belt. So I thought a 33 to 1 Intense Approach could be worth an each way bet.
Interesting Intense Approach. I like a Cobden or a Bowen. Any of them will do for me. One horse I wanted to mention in the On The Radar section was this Manila 6-0 for Gordon Elliott. He's not a particularly a horse I'm interested in backing, but I am fascinated in watching him run this weekend because he's 8-10 to 1 for the Pertemps final at Cheltenham, but he's not even qualified yet, but he will be if he runs in the first 4 at Haydock in the first race this Saturday. He ran in that Limerick Novice Hurdle that throws up festival winner year after year behind the big Westerner, and he's got Cheltenham form as well, having chased home Potter's Charm earlier in the season. He's already got 5 hurdles runs under his belt, so he'll qualify for any handicap Gordon wants him to, and it could be the Pertemps. So Manila 6-0, definitely worth watching.
It was bound to happen.
Definitely worth watching this weekend.
The problem is with waiting. I mean, ideally you'd want a bigger price, wouldn't you? But the problem with waiting is he could easily be 4 or 5 to 1. A bit like Jerry. Yeah,
thank you.
A bit like Jericho de Repamere last week. If you'd taken a view beforehand, you were getting a lot bigger price than the 6s now, weren't you?
Well, I just thought it's one for the listeners to decide themselves.
Make that decision.
It's thrown out there. It's probably not one I'll back beforehand, I must admit, but I will watch him and see how he gets on.
Is he more likely to finish 1st or 4th at the weekend, Ben?
Yeah. Have you got a jockey that can count, Ben?
I think a running on 3rd or 4th is going to be absolutely perfect.
Just on that Limerick race, Scoop, I know you tend to do it every year, and it is brilliant. It's thrown up so many festival winners, hasn't it? I think last year we had the Albert Bartlett winner, didn't we? Stella Story finished 2nd, but It really is. It never lets you down, does it? That Limerick. What do we call it this year? The Lions of Limerick Jaguar Land Rover Novice Hurdle Grade 2 at Limerick on December the 26th. It's a fabulous race to watch over and over again for Grade 1s.
It really is. Yeah, I mean, Martella Tower and Penhill, going back, Weapons Amnesty, I think. Faheen, all ran in this race before winning Grade 1s at Cheltenham, but it's worked in the handicaps too. I think Delta Work ran in the race before he won handicap at the festival. So, yeah, always well worth watching again and again, that Limerick race at Christmas. It seems to throw up Cheltenham winners year after year. That is on the radar. And we're going to finish with From the Pot, some actual bets that we've found for Cheltenham. And now, I think I know which way we're going here, but I don't know which one of you is going to put the points on. Is it going to be Massey? Is it going to be Martin? But I'm guessing we're good.
I had a point last week. It's Martin. I tell you what I do. I tell you, let's blow every other podcast out of the water and have a point win double, Jericho de Repene and no one. Blow them out of the water. Let's have 121 double. Blow them out of the water when it's come up. Let's do that.
I do. I like the thinking.
I think we've got to have it. Well, you don't really want to be backing each way at this moment in time, do you? To be perfectly honest with you,
no.
I reckon 2 points win no ordinary Joe. We've got plenty to play with here. 2 points win no ordinary Joe in the Martin Pipe. I do think now is the time, unless everyone objects, is to have a little bit each way on Golden Ace in the Champion Hurdle, because I just think it can pop up and end up being a good bet.
Okay, so let's have a look at what we can get on No Ordinary Joe. What we're thinking, Martin, is about 14-1?
Yeah, well, top price is 16s, but generally 14s, yeah, I think. Okay.
So 2 points, No Ordinary Joe in the Martin Pipe. And then, I think we've got to get on this Champion Hurdle bet. Golden Ace, what can we get here then?
We can get a bit of
50-1 in a place.
We've got to have the non-runner no bet.
The fifth, you've got to have the non-runner no bet, really, because if she's not good enough to compete in the Kingwell, which I think she will be, but if she's not, I think 40s is the top price, non-runner no bet, 33s, in plenty of places.
Okay, a good couple of bets there to end the podcast. Has anyone else got anything before we sign off?
What about this intense approach as well?
What's that, Dave?
How many points have we had now?
Well, you had a couple last week.
Yeah.
We've got a couple there. We've had 6, so we've got 14 left
Beautiful.
For the
7 points each way for the cross country next week. Lovely.
Yeah, plenty to play with.
I'm all for the Golden Ace one, because you have to look at markets that might get shaken up a little bit between now and then, and that's the way we're playing it. I know it didn't quite work out last week in the Champion Chase, but I mean, first approach. The Albert Bartlett horse.
Intense approach.
Intense approach is the first time I've come close to being quite strong on one at the prices, but obviously we know that that's not going to cut up necessarily, and he's going to be a big price, I suspect, on the day. But I think closer to the time, if jockey bookings, that's kind of the one thing that might sway me towards getting involved with him at 25's anti-post. We know he's going for the race.
Okay. Excellent. A few bits there to finish the podcast. Thank you very much, gents. Thanks for your time. We will be back again next week, where we will be discussing all things Champion Chase, as well as usual sections on the radar and From the Pot. Thank you for listening. We'll see you again next week.